This is Sudan, a vast country at the crossroads of North and Sub-Saharan Africa. Since April 2023, it has been the site of one of the world's fastest-growing humanitarian disasters, a brutal, fragmented civil war that has torn cities apart, driven millions from their homes, and turned Darfur back into a battlefield. The central question many now ask is simple and urgent: who drives this war, and who is arming and funding the fighters on the ground? To understand today, we have to go back. The RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, did not emerge from nowhere. Its roots lie in the Janjaweed militias, irregular Arab horsemen and camel riders who were mobilized in Darfur in the early 2000s during a campaign that international investigators later characterized as crimes against humanity. Over time, these militias were reorganized, monetized, and integrated into the state's security architecture. The man most closely associated with the RSF is General Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, widely known as Hemedti. Hemedti rose from the Darfuri horse tribes in the Janjaweed network to become the formal commander of the RSF when Khartoum created the force in 2013. He built not just a military force, but a business empire, from gold trading to import-export networks that made the RSF economically powerful as well as militarily organized. Sudan's more recent collapse began after the 2019 ouster of longtime ruler Omar al Bashir. A fragile civilian-led transition followed, but in October 2021, the army and the RSF together overturned that transition in a coup. Initially, the military leadership, headed by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and Hemedti were allies in the junta. Yet the alliance was always tense. The RSF had money, private networks, and its own political ambitions, while the army controlled formal state power. Tensions turned to open fighting on 15 April 2023. The spark was a bitter dispute over plans to integrate the RSF into the Sudanese armed forces under a single chain of command. RSF mobilization in Khartoum triggered firefights at the presidential palace, the army headquarters, and finally a battle for control of the capital. The confrontation quickly spread beyond Khartoum, plunging Sudan into nationwide warfare. As the war widened, Darfur, long scarred by earlier violence, again became a core battleground. Human rights groups and the UN documented large-scale killings and the targeting of specific ethnic communities. By late 2024 and into 2025, observers reported sieges of cities such as El Fasher, mass civilian casualties, and acts that some international bodies described as ethnic cleansing or worse. Who finances the RSF? Here, the reporting is extensive but must be precise. Multiple investigations and human rights groups document a network that links RSF revenues to gold trade and business operations, many of which run through Gulf trade hubs, notably companies and transactions connected to the United Arab Emirates. Researchers and watchdogs say the RSF's access to gold resources and foreign markets has underpinned its ability to buy weapons and pay fighters. Journalistic and NGO investigations and an Amnesty International probe have found weaponry in Sudan that appears to have been re-exported via the UAE, including sophisticated Chinese systems that violated UN arms embargoes. The Sentry and other investigative groups published detailed reporting on RSF business networks registered in the UAE. Governments and analysts differ on the degree of official UAE state direction versus private or proxy facilitation, but the documented flows are real and consequential. Accusations against the UAE have political consequences. Sudanese officials and some diplomats accuse Emirati actors of materially supporting the RSF, directly or indirectly, by facilitating logistics, payments, and arms re-exports. The UAE has repeatedly denied state sponsorship of atrocities and has emphasized humanitarian and diplomatic efforts. Meanwhile, Sudanese authorities and international advocates have pursued legal and political pressure, including filings at international bodies and calls for sanctions. Another reported actor is the Russian private military network, popularly known as Wagner. Early in the conflict, U.S. and Western reporting alleged Wagner provided training, arms, and logistics to groups aligned with the RSF.
That relationship appears to have evolved. At times, Wagner and Russian state interests hedged between the RSF and the SAF, while in other phases, Moscow's posture shifted towards the army, tied to strategic plans such as access to naval facilities. The battlefield picture therefore features multiple external actors, with competing aims and intermittent support. On the ground, foreign policy debates matter insofar as they fuel the capacity to fight, but the human cost is immediate. Millions have been displaced, food insecurity is widespread, hospitals and schools were attacked, and urban warfare in Khartoum trapped civilians in peril. The UN, WHO, and aid agencies repeatedly warned of famine risks and collapsing services. Key milestones since the outbreak: the initial Battle of Khartoum in April 2023, repeated failed ceasefires and Jeddah-brokered attempts, the widening of fighting in Darfur and Kordofan, international pressure, sanctions, and legal moves, and the seizure of strategic towns and airfields by both sides in waves through 2024 and 2025. In October-November 2025, the RSF took El Fasher in North Darfur after heavy fighting, a development condemned by rights monitors who reported mass atrocities there. Accounts of mass killing in Darfur prompted the United States to determine in January 2025 that the RSF and allied militias had committed genocide. Sudanese diplomats asked international courts to hold external actors responsible for complicity. Again, the law and the politics are complex. Proving state complicity requires evidence of intent and direction, something investigators continue to assemble even as the fighting goes on. So what does this all mean? Three linked dynamics explain the RSF's resilience and the war's persistence. A politicized paramilitary with deep economic roots, the RSF is not merely an armed band, it is a revenue-generating actor anchored in gold, trade, and business networks that fund recruitment and procurement. External patronage and permissive channels. Evidence shows weapons and logistics have transited through neighboring states and Gulf trade hubs. The UAE features heavily in reporting as a logistical and commercial node, though the exact degree of official state intent remains disputed in international diplomacy. Geopolitics layered on local rivalries. Russia, Gulf states, regional governments, and private security actors have all engaged in ways that amplify conflict dynamics rather than resolving them. Paths to ending the war are difficult, but not impossible. Sustained, verifiable ceasefires, cuts to the illicit revenue lines that finance militias, accountability for atrocities, and a credible transitional settlement that removes the incentives for armed seizure of power. International pressure can help, yet it must be combined with regional diplomacy and genuine protection for civilians on the ground. Sudan's destruction is not only geopolitical, it is human. Behind each headline are families, towns, and histories at risk. Tracking who funds the fighters, whether gold brokers, Gulf intermediaries, or private military networks, matters. Cutting those lines will be part of any chance to stop the killing. For now, thousands continue to pay the price while the world argues about responsibility.